We told you today was going to have a workplace slant to it. That's because we spend so much time in the workplace. And if we're not thinking about that setting, that environment, and how we can improve workplace mental health, we're missing a real chance here to make an impact in people's life. But organizations are made up of people, so this really is for everyone. And we thought a good starting place would be to speak with an expert, Dr. Frey, who has a great lay of the land when it comes to the current state of mental health in the workplace, as well as what workplaces are doing to support mental health and suicide prevention among their employees. So to do that, we turn to Dr. Frey in Baltimore. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Frey.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark and David, for hosting and putting together this event. And thank you for including the University of Maryland as one of the host sites. Thank you, everybody who came today to learn and support each other as we talk about this topic, and as well to everybody online. So for those of you that know me, and you probably know me as a professor, as a researcher, as a mental health and suicide advocate, but you may not know me as well as a client of mental health services. So I was asked to talk today about trends in the workplace related to mental health and suicide prevention. And instead of giving my traditional academic talk with graphs and charts and research and numbers, I thought I would try to integrate a little bit about trends from what I've experienced both personally and professionally throughout my career. So my goal for today is for you to leave educated and energized. I want to provide you with a roadmap that you can use to make your workplace a more mentally healthy and safe environment. So let's start with the personal. 20 years ago, I was offered my dream job. Can you guess what it was? If you guessed it was being a professor in this very building at the School of Social Work at University of Maryland, you are right. So after a pretty intense interview process, you would think that I would be nothing less than ecstatic. And while my professional life at that time was on the up and up, my personal life was crumbling by the minute. But in fact, the first day I reported here in this building for my job, I had to meet with the Dean for Academics to talk about the program I was hired to chair. And that morning, my spouse at the time had told me he is moving out that day. And in fact, would use the time that I was at my new job to move his belongings out of our home. Well, I was very unprepared for that news, and I completely went numb. I had thoughts of despair, thoughts of hopelessness. I had fleeting thoughts that maybe I would just be better off dead. But somehow I managed to drudge myself to the office that day, and I met with my dean, and I don't remember one word I said. I just know that after that meeting, I ran to my new office, I closed the door and broke down and cried. And let me tell you, they were ugly tears. All of a sudden, there was a knock on my door. A colleague I didn't know at all came to welcome me to the school. I quickly wiped my eyes, and he said, when he opened the door, he thought something might be wrong and said, "How are you?" Of course, I lied. I said I was okay. And in now what I know to be his style, he used humor to try to comfort me, to let me know I wasn't alone, that he was here to support me any way he could, and that I had friends here at my new job. I don't remember one thing about work that day. But let me tell you, I remember my colleague's smile. I remember his caring nature. And I think it's important when I talk about trends in mental health in the workplace that we recognize the power of our coworkers and colleagues. And so my colleague taking time to show care and concern for me was exactly what I needed on one of the darkest days of my entire life. And so Dr. Bruce DeForge, he knows I'm naming him today, I thank you, and I will be forever grateful for you to come and knock on my door. Far too long, employees have been encouraged to keep their home life at home and their work life at work. Dr. Rosbeth Moss-Cantor's work in the 70s showed us that that is not the reality. And in fact, over the past several decades, employees have grown even stronger in their desire to bring their whole self to work, to be recognized for all the parts of themselves and not have to hide who they are, including sometimes their emotions and reactions to stress. But for a long time, workplace mental health focused almost solely on our ability to identify and support struggling employees and refer them for resources outside of the workplace, maybe like an EAP, Employee Assistance Program, work life, or wellness, and encourage managers with training to document employee performance and through a performance review, be able to not only address workplace problems, but try to get the employee to reach out for help that can help them resolve things that might be going on within their personal lives. Now, let me tell you, all of these are very important today for worker mental health, but they are not enough. Counseling was extremely helpful to me during that challenging time in my life, but it wasn't enough. I spend most of my time at work. I needed to have a workplace where I felt I could positively contribute, a place that respected me, a place where I could actually feel like I could contribute as a human being. It is no longer good enough as employers to simply pull people back from the brink of collapse. We must move more upstream and do more prevention. And by doing this, we not only prevent crisis and suicidal intensity, but we also help to relieve the burden on our overworked and under-resourced mental health network and workforce. So let's fast forward a bit in mental health trends and think about the impact of COVID-19, the pandemic, as well as racial injustice and social unrest happening at the same time. This changed how employers view mental health and well-being, as well as some of the programs that they offer. For decades, I feel like I've been banging my head against the wall, begging employers to invest in their employees, that this is the best investment they can make, and it would help their return on investment. But without personally experiencing mental illness, substance use, suicide, it is really hard to get CEOs and CFOs to think about how they could have a positive influence on public mental health and suicide prevention, while also, by the way, helping their bottom line. So during the pandemic, employers realized they had no choice. They had to confront head-on how to support employees and family members during this time. They saw firsthand how disinvestment in mental health and well-being ill-prepared them to deal with the crises that people were now bringing to work. The initial response during the pandemic, you might recall, was to encourage utilization of more resources, right? Counseling went online, you were able to do some of the work life and wellness programs from home, and of course, mindfulness, being centered. These individual-focused interventions seem to be the answer to the problems, but many of us in this room, if not all of us, know, and research confirms, you cannot meditate your way out of a toxic work environment. And in fact, individual interventions are not always enough. So during the pandemic, I was asked to consult with a Fortune 100 international company to sit on their International Wellness Committee. At the first meeting, I was pretty upfront. Those of you that know me, I don't sugarcoat it. And I said, I'm happy to sit on this committee, but I'm not going to come here and just recommend individual behaviors to be incentivized and focus all of the onus on how individuals need to cope with their mental health and well-being. In fact, I'm going to push you to consider more systemic problems and how some of the organizational factors going on increase employee stress. I'm going to push you to take a closer look at how are you offering programs like paid leave, hazard pay, and how are you treating your Black and brown employees? For this employer, we're on the front line of the pandemic in distribution lines and didn't have the luxury to stay home and safe during the pandemic. Well, let me tell you, I was expecting to be told, thanks, Jodi, but no thanks, and never hear from them again. But instead, they said, we've never had a social worker at this level of our workplace. The fact that you're pushing us on day one to look at the integration of mental health and DE&I is exactly why we need to have you here at the table. Since the onset of the pandemic, employers have invested way more into worker mental health, but they've also been forced to see firsthand the problems resulting from increased cost and lack of access to good, effective insurance-based care for their employees. Employers have pushed their partners and their vendors to be more proactive. They don't want to wait for someone to call when they're in a crisis. They want to encourage early intervention through things like universal screening, through coaching. They've been investing more in peer support and having programs internally that can provide both initial and ongoing support to employees. This, as well as the warm transfers to the mental health professionals when more assessment and support is needed. So now, as we consider where we're living in our post-pandemic lives, mental health trends in the workplace continue to push the envelope upstream. As we have moved from providing only crisis intervention and encouraging only individual behavior change, more progressive companies and workplaces have recognized the power of prevention and revising and enhancing their policies to be more fully integrated into the fabric of the work organization, as well as resourcing those programs so that they are set up for success. If we can prevent someone from experiencing a major mental health crisis and reduce suicide intensity, we have the opportunity to focus more on well-being. We have the opportunity to focus more on resilience and ongoing recovery. And guess what, guys? Research tells us that equates to better workplace outcomes as well. There's been a major shift in workplaces to train managers to be more empathic leaders that are coached on how to share their story in a way to normalize and reduce stigma about mental health help seeking. These upstream approaches are very impactful in reducing psychological harm and improving psychological safety. Policies that focus on no tolerance of harassment, bullying, racism, and discrimination in the workplace have a positive effect on the overall workplace culture, including morale and engagement. It is so important for us to help leaders to understand that they do need to be patient as they invest in culture change, because they do still often want to see immediate results from a new program or a new policy. And we know that culture change takes time. Changing that culture is an increasingly popular trend. It's one that I really hope will continue to flourish. So here at the University of Maryland, I remember our previous university president, President Perman, saying, it was, quote, there's not enough nice in the healthcare industry, and nice is what the public demands. And I thought, he would talk about being nice to each other. It was actually part of his motto and part of his vision. And when I first heard this, I kind of chuckled and thought, being nice, that seems really simple and not very impactful. And when I think back to the kind smile, the caring mannerisms of my colleague on one of the worst days of my life, I realized being nice is not only simple, it is extremely effective. So, as we come to the end of my talk, you heard a little bit about my journey and how I see some of the trends in workplace mental health. I want to give you a roadmap, steps that you can take when you leave today to start working on your own workplace. Think about, why did you stay with a certain employer? Why did you leave? As you think about your why, I want you to be able to use those examples today as you maybe take a look at the national guidelines for workplace suicide prevention. These were created by the committee that I co-chair with Dr. Sally Spencer-Thomas and Chase Plank. The national guidelines are broken down into 9 practices that include downstream interventions, some that we talked about today, like crisis intervention, mitigating risk, thinking about medication and gun safety, and postvention. Moving to the middle of the screen, you can see our midstream approaches that we touched on, including things like universal screening, peer support, as well as, I can't see the third one, self-care and orientation. When we move into the upstream approaches that I really have been stressing, and I hope you're excited about them, we look at things like working on culture to create empathic leaders, communication that not only educates employees, but also works to reduce stigma, including storytelling, policy revisions, and integrating DE&I and mental health. These practices are a guide for you. They are freely available, and I hope that you will take a look to begin the process of becoming a more psychologically safe and psychologically healthy workplace. At workplacesuicideprevention.com, you can see all of this information for free and join the over 1,400 workplaces and professional organizations that have made a pledge to make suicide prevention a health and safety priority in their workplace. The best part is you can start anywhere that makes sense for your own workplace, your own department, your own organization, but start somewhere, and please take the pledge today. So myself and all of my colleagues, I want to thank you all for taking time to learn how you can help to make your work environment a place where we all can thrive, where mental health and well-being is fully supported. And I thank you for taking the time to invest in that today. Back to you, Mark and Dave.